The president is building out his campaign early so that he's got a straight shot to be the GOP nominee in 2020. A big part of that, as you mentioned, is adding more senior level staff. Today, the campaign announced the hiring of Communications Director Tim Murtaugh, Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany, and Strategic Communications Director Mark Lauder, who's a former aide to Vice President Mike Pence and who you're about to talk to. Cole Blocker was also added as Finance Director and Megan Powers as an Operations Director. The core of the campaign has been in place for about a year, including campaign manager Brad Parscale, who spoke to Martha about strategy back in January. Watch.
As being an incumbent, we're building a different operation now than we had in 2016. In 2016, it was very grassroots. As you know, the campaign sometimes at its best operated at a fraction of what probably was needed. It was mobile, it was changing, it was adapting. This was a man running his first candidacy ever. And in 2020, the operation is different. This is going to be a much larger ground game.
Parscale came on board a full year earlier than campaign managers for both George W. Bush and Barack Obama. The president's daughter-in-law, Laura, will serve as senior advisor. Former Massachusetts Governor William Weld is challenging the president for the Republican nomination, but it is going to be a long shot because the Republican National Committee has already said it will support the president, meaning there are no sanctioned debates, and the National Party is working with state party organizations to line up delegates for the Republican National Convention next year. Then there's the money. The president will enter the election cycle with an enormous fundraising lead over Democrats. Just in the last 3 months of 2018, the Trump campaign and its affiliates raised $21 million, putting the re-election balance at an astounding $129 million. At the same time in 2010, President Obama had $4 million. In 2002, George W. Bush had $3.2 million. The Republican Party has also maintained a robust staff in key battleground states to counter the growing list of Democratic presidential hopefuls. Now, all of that said, a new Washington Post ABC poll says 56% of all Americans say they would definitely not vote for Trump should he become the nominee. Martha.
Yep, they see him as beatable in that poll. Here now with more, Mark Lauder, that newly minted Strategic Communications Director for the Trump campaign, and Chris Hahn, radio host and former senior aide to Senator Chuck Schumer. Chris, let me start with you. Is that amount of fundraising daunting to Democrats at this stage of the game?
Well, when you look at his cash on hand, he only had $19.5 million. I don't know what he's been spending all this money on so early in the campaign. Cash on hand is really what matters. He hasn't
those may be commitments that haven't come in yet. I don't know. Mark can answer that in a second. But go ahead.
Well, no, that's not how it works. It's, what you raise is what you've taken in, and $19 million on hand should scare him. Bernie Sanders raised $3.5 million today, so he's not too far behind the president. He's only been campaigning for a couple of hours.
Let's just start there. Hold on, Mark. How do you respond to that? I'm curious.
Well, let's remember, too, that the president has been on the campaign trail since very early last year, having mega rallies, attracting tens of thousands of people. Those are the kinds of things that the campaign is currently paying for. So in addition to having one of the most sophisticated staff build-outs that we are currently in the process of doing, he's also busy having mega rallies, as we've seen just in recent weeks.
So you're saying that's where the money's going so far, into those rallies?
There's a lot of money that goes there, and but there's no question the president is going to have all of the support and all the money he needs to easily win re-election in 2020.
All right, I want to play a soundbite from Bernie Sanders, which I think goes to the heart of what the argument against the president is going to be, and get your reaction. Let's play that.
I think he is a pathological liar every day. I also think he is a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, a xenophobe, somebody who is gaining cheap political points by trying to pick on minorities, often undocumented immigrants.
So the pro argument is going to be, some sort of socialist leaning idea about things like $15 minimum wage and free college and some of those ideas. And then the opposing perspective to President Trump is going to be he's a bad guy, Mark.
And it's just ludicrous. And I understand that Bernie Sanders is trying to stand out from the 50 socialists that are now running. He's no longer unique and quirky. He's just another socialist running for the Democrat Party. The president's going to run on results. And whether it's women, whether it's African Americans and minorities, they know that they've got more money in their paychecks. They know they have more jobs because of this president's leadership. And, you know, the nonsense that you see coming from the Democrats on this, they'll sort their socialism platform out. They'll nominate a socialist. We'll go for freedom.
Clearly not all Democrats that are running are talking that way. Amy Klobuchar is saying, look, you know, wake up. We cannot pay for college for everyone for free in this country. And Howard Schultz, who is running as an independent, says that, you know, there's no way that any opponent can oust Trump no matter how far to the radical left they are. It's a fallacy. Chris.
Look, I think that whoever the Democrats nominate is going to have a very good chance of beating a president whose numbers have remained in the low 40s his entire presidency. He has never been above 50% in his polling average. He's at 41% now. Mark, I love you. I hope the president runs so you can have a job for 2 years, but I'm not so sure he's gonna run. I think that the guy thinks I can only play for the tips for so long in my lifetime, and maybe I'm going to spend my summers doing that and not going to rallies, because I think that he knows that things are only going to get worse for him politically in the next 2 years and even thereafter. And I think if he decides not to run again, he could claim victory for whatever he thinks he accomplished in the last 4 years and move on with his life and enjoy it.
I don't know about you. I have no idea what's in the president's mind, but I don't think he's thinking that at all. That's just my guess, watching how this is going. Mark, you're working with him. What do you think?
I can guarantee you 100% that President Donald Trump is running for re-election. He's focused on it, and he cannot wait to take his message of success to the American people and contrast it with this radical socialist platform that Democrats now stand for, and we will see how middle America is going to figure that out.
You're shooting down the socialism side of this, but you know, I mean, when even across, like, Kamala Harris, you know, is one of the most popular candidates running so far. Vice President Joe Biden, we don't know whether or not he's going to get in. Bernie Sanders is the second on the list in terms of polls. He is clearly in favor of these socialist ideas. Kamala Harris has said that she's open to removing people's private health care. I mean, these are very radical ideas to most Americans, and they represent some of the strongest candidates so far in the race.
I think when you call them socialism, people think they're radical, but when you then break them down and talk about what they are, providing health care for all Americans, providing affordable or even free college tuitions for all Americans.
What about what they cost?
I think people are, Mark, hold on a minute, Mark. I think when you break those things down, people then like them. We already have socialist-like programs in this country. It's called Social Security. It's called the VA. It's called the Army. It's called police forces. It's called roads. But Republicans want to, instead of talking about ideas, they want to demonize people who have those ideas and call them socialists, and not try to engage in an actual debate about how we're going to do things to make this country
Mark,
better.
Final thought,
and I think that's their problem. And by the way, that's why they lost in the midterms, and that's why they're going to lose the next time. And that's why, Mark, the president is not going to run for re-election. Trust me.
Could be. Mark, very quick, Mark.
Absolutely. When you say that we're going to take people's private health insurance away from them and just put them on government health care against their will, I'll have that debate every day.
All right, we got to leave it there. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll do it again soon. Thanks, guys.
President Trump is once again being accused of trying to get a friendly face on the inside of investigations into his actions. He denies that. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts has the backstory tonight from the North Lawn. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. President Trump hammered his former Attorney General Jeff Sessions mercilessly for recusing himself from the Russia investigation. Now it's another recusal, that of the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, that has reportedly captured the president's attention. President Trump today denied that he ever tried to influence the widening investigation surrounding him in the U.S. Attorney's office in Manhattan.
No, not at all. I don't know who gave you that. That's more fake news. There's a lot of fake news out there. No, I didn't.
According to the New York Times, as the investigation of Michael Cohen was hitting a crescendo late last year, President Trump reached out to his acting Attorney General, Matt Whitaker, to ask if the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Jeffrey Berman, could take charge of the investigations. Berman, who had been appointed by President Trump, had recused himself from the case. The Times reports Whitaker did not attempt to make a change. Just asking Whitaker to put a perceived Trump loyalist in charge of the investigation could have consequences for the president.
If you try to interfere with a criminal prosecution that may knock at your own door by putting your ally in there, that is clearly an attempt to obstruct justice.
In his appearance before the House Judiciary Committee 2 weeks ago, Whitaker was asked if President Trump had ever tried to influence an investigation.
And I have not talked to the President of the United States about the special counsel's investigation.
Today, the DOJ fell back on that testimony to deny the New York Times article. In a statement saying, under oath to the House Judiciary Committee, then acting Attorney General Whitaker stated that at no time has the White House asked for, nor have I provided any promises or commitments concerning the special counsel's investigation or any other investigation. Mr. Whitaker stands by his testimony. The Times also reported that when Whitaker did not ask Berman to unrecuse himself, President Trump, who had been bullish on his acting attorney general, suddenly soured on him. The president also denied that.
I have a lot of respect for Mr. Whitaker. I think he's done a great job. He's a very fine man, and he should be given a lot of thanks by our nation.
As Democrats added another bombshell item to their growing list of all things Trump to investigate, President Trump predicted victory in the courts for his emergency declaration.
I think in the end, we're going to be very successful with the lawsuit. So it was filed in the Ninth Circuit. And I actually think we might do very well even in the Ninth Circuit because it's an open and closed case.
Led by California, 16 states filed suit against the declaration, insisting that using an executive action to circumvent Congress on appropriations violates the Constitution.
In every respect, the facts prove that Donald Trump is acting outside the law in declaring an emergency, but he's also acting outside the law in trying to raid pots of money that have already been allocated by Congress.
The emergency declaration only refers to money that is contained in the military construction budget. That's about $3.6 billion. There's another $4.5 billion that President Trump can get to without the emergency declaration. And if he can get his hands on all of that, that's enough money to build about 180 miles of border wall. Brett?
John Roberts, live on the North Lawn. John, thanks.